And B, are they able to actually complete this with some type of resistance that's equal to, or in the case of the strain, less than the opposite or good side. So we would always start with testing the good leg. For brevity's sake, we'll be just doing the affected side with Jason here. One of the tests that we hadn't done before, and one that's actually quite easy to do, is just a resistant hamstring test while we're in this prone position. To help standardize this test, there's a few things you can do, but one of the easiest is to actually just have a dorsiflex your foot and then align the other leg with that same, or that toe with the bottom, or sorry, the top of your heel. Go ahead and relax that. This way we know that we're relatively the same. What I'm going to have Jason do is he's going to try to bring his heel towards his butt. Go ahead, Jason. And I'm just going to hold resistance for about 3 seconds, and then I'll try to actively pull down and see what the eccentric ability of that muscle is like. Now, obviously, you stop immediately if there's pain, or if as you start to move from being a concentric to an eccentric, if something is occurring that's causing discomfort, you would stop there. On the field, you're not going to have a handheld diameter to give you a good objective measure to this, and so you're going to be left to basically feeling what one side feels like compared to the other. But in the case of a hamstring injury, more often than not, it's actually not very difficult to discern that one side isn't giving you the same amount of resistance compared to the other side. Jason, I'll have you flip over onto your back. To continue on with some of this testing, standardized glute bridge is another version of it. Again, if you wanted to look at standardizing how you're doing this, you can bring the heel first to match where the medial joint line is in the opposite leg, and then bring the other leg up just to standardize the angle of your knee. And again, all I'm going to have Jason do is go ahead and bridge up and come right back down. What you want to be able to see is there a symmetrical rise in the hips, or does it start to deviate from one side to the other, indicating that that pelvis is perhaps compensating for potential hamstring tear. And again, if there's pain that's involved. Once I'm confident that he's able to do this, I'll actually have him bridge again and just using the hands, the palms of my hands to gauge pressure. Is he actively pressing into one hand more than the other? Again, not the most objective way of necessarily doing this, but when you're out in the field, it's better than not having anything else to do. In addition to having his knees at 90, we do like to test at varying torque angles. So when he has his knees up, we're looking more at kind of a distal focus. If I have him go into a straight leg, go ahead and bridge up. Now we're looking more at the origin, so those high hamstrings that you may miss if you only do glute bridge and relax. If he's comfortable with doing all this, we can then go to biasing a single leg. So go ahead, Jason. Good, and you can compare both sides. Again, it doesn't take much to elicit painful response in a true tear or strain. That's probably greater than a grade 1. With those grade 1s, it might be a little bit more difficult because there are clearly other muscles that are going to be able to do that same hip extension movement. We're trying to bias it so that at least there's either indication at the hip that there might be something going on, or again, that painful response that they feel. To go into muscle testing a little bit further, and something that we had showed you on that video, there's also the ability to test eccentric strength of the hamstring in this supine position. Again, all we will need to do is just bring that leg up so that it's matching the medial aspect of the joint line on the other side, and I'll have him come to a 90-degree position here. I'll place my shoulder underneath. Jason will ask you to keep that dorsiflex for me, and what I want you to do is try to bring your heel to your butt in this position, okay? And I'll ask him to do that as hard as he can. After 3 seconds or so, keep hard there, I'll try to lift that leg up, and again, as we're doing this, we're trying to look for the eccentric ability of the hamstring in this position. Now, if you look at where we are here, again, as I spoke about earlier, we're getting into what I think is more of a specific mechanism of where the majority of these injuries are going to be occurring. The knees fully blocked is getting to front side as he's coming up into late swing, possibly early ground contact. This is where they believe those injuries occur. And again, if it was truly eccentric contraction, that's what we're going for. So there's some logic there for you to understand why that might be an important test to do. Again, there's multiple different muscle tests that you're able to do. I would suggest finding those that you're able to at least standardize so that everyone on your team is able to do them, and something that will give you the most useful information. It doesn't necessarily have to be a most sensitive or specific test from a research standpoint or what's current literature, but if it's giving you information that you think is valuable, you definitely want to be noting that down. The next thing we'll do is we'll look at kind of range of motion in fascial slings and fascial testing. And sorry, before I do that, do you want to add into the muscle test?
Yeah, just real quick. As you've been kind of going through the hamstring testing, you'll see Jazz playing with different variables, and I think this applies to not just hamstring injuries, but quad injuries, or whatever injury you may be going, is we're looking at length tension relationships of the anatomy. So the hamstring is a 2-joint muscle, so you can affect the length tension either from the knee or from the hip. Typically you want to start in a place where there's maybe less tension on the muscle, so in a shortened position, and then progressively work to a more lengthened position. Also, you can look at different contraction types. So you've seen concentric, isometric, and eccentric. Typically, as you're progressing along that continuum, concentric's the lightest, isometric's the next, and then with eccentric being the heaviest load to the muscle. So that's just some thoughts on how you can progress your evaluation. Maybe work short to long. You can work concentric to eccentric. Just some kind of thoughts on that.
Absolutely. So going back into the range of motion / fascial sling test, the test that we did in our first video, the hospital test, really looks at trying to take advantage of full hip flexion and full knee extension. So similar to the hamstring muscle test that we did, but what I'll have Jason do is actually grab the back of your thigh and pull that towards yourself as far as you can go. Bring that up. Good. And now extend your knee, making sure you're maintaining contact with your thigh towards your chest. Good. And so we're looking at the range of motion that he's able to demonstrate at the knee, how much knee extension he has. We can compare that from side to side to give us a good indication of if the stretch tolerance in this side is equal to, or perhaps a little bit less than the other side. Now, if you do have a strain you're suspecting, be very, very, very careful doing this. You don't want to further injure that muscle by putting it at an extreme end range of motion. But again, a very good test for us to determine what the fascial sling, at least, and what the stretch tolerance in that muscle group is like. Now, we can take this a little bit further and make it more dynamic. Carl Askeling has a great paper on what he determines as the H test, and a lot of manual therapists are using the H test as a test to determine if someone's ready to return to sprint performance, or during your phases or your criteria base of working an athlete through specific training blocks, if they're ready to progress to something that's a little bit more holistic in nature. I won't necessarily go over what he does for his H test, but our rendition of it is a little bit different. Again, I like to keep the knee in a position that will mimic that front side mechanics, and where I think some of this stuff is mostly coming from. We'll have Jason maintain that position. Now you can hold down the leg or let it be, and Jason, in this position, you're just going to be rapidly firing that leg into flexion extension as fast as you can. Good. Is there an ability to do it? And not only that, but is there any hesitation for the athlete to do that? Asking them to be in that position is one that can elicit a threatful response. And if that's what we're seeing, it might be a good indication that they're not quite ready to proceed, or that there's more cerebral issues that are going on that need to be addressed as well. If they're able to demonstrate that, then we can start to look at doing, again, our glute bridge. So glute bridge on that side, Jay, we'll bring this one up and do the same test. Now all I'm doing is I'm trying to see if he can stabilize the pelvis while I'm asking him to do another motion. And again, you can repeat the test with the affected leg down, having that glute bridge, and coming up. Now, I'm not necessarily seeing what the good leg is able to do, but whether or not the affected leg is able to stabilize the pelvis while the other leg is passively doing something. So again, we're kind of looking at the reciprocal motion of both hemipelvises and what's occurring with that. You have something to add to that?
Just real quick on the range of motion, just a little, I think there's some evidence showing that if there's a 30-degree difference or more between ability to extend that knee in that position, that they're more likely to have a longer return to play, a longer time before they can return to play. So I think just checking, you need to check both sides, as Jazz mentioned, but I think that can give some prognosis to the athlete, which can be comforting to the athlete when they know when they're likely to be able